After watching this, you will finally understand why you sometimes feel like you're being watched even when she says she trusts you completely. You're not paranoid. You're not inventing patterns where none exist. You are simply starting to notice what has always been happening in the subtext of every casual conversation, every seemingly innocent situation, every test disguised as a spontaneous moment. The truth is, while you think you're building a relationship based on honesty and transparency, she is conducting a series of sophisticated psychological experiments to assess your loyalty, your emotional stability, and your true value as a long-term partner. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's not misogyny disguised as social analysis. It's evolutionary strategy adapted for the 21st century, operating on a level so fundamental that most women don't even consciously recognize they're doing it. And here's the part that will really bother you. These tests are so subtle, so perfectly integrated into the natural flow of life together, that most men spend years being evaluated without ever realizing they're under permanent observation. Have you ever felt confused about why she overreacted to something trivial? Ever wondered why a simple situation suddenly turned into a discussion about what this says about our relationship? You were being tested, and you probably failed without even knowing you were taking an exam. Today, I will reveal the 6 loyalty and reliability tests that modern women systematically apply, often without even realizing they're doing it. I will show you how to recognize them, what they really measure, and how to respond in a way that demonstrates genuine value instead of calculated performance. Because here is the truth that will change your perspective. You cannot pass these tests by trying to pass them. The conscious attempt at performance is exactly what reveals you are not the man she is looking for. The first test operates on a simple but devastatingly effective premise. She needs to know if you are the same man alone, with her, and in front of others. Your grandfather could simply demonstrate he had a stable job and good intentions. Today you must prove psychological consistency across multiple social contexts, and she will create specific situations to measure exactly that. It's not about blind trust. It's about empirical validation of who you really are when the spotlights are off. Let me show you how this works in practice. You have plans. Ever dinner? She cancels at the last minute, saying a friend is going through an emotional crisis and needs urgent support. Your immediate reaction is observed. Do you show frustration disguised as understanding or genuine empathy for the situation? But the test doesn't end there. 2 hours later, you see on her stories that the crisis was actually a casual party with her group of friends, colorful drinks, smiles, music. What do? Do you immediately confront her with indignation about the lie? Do you hold a silent resentment that will poison the next few weeks? Or do you simply observe, recalibrate your expectations about her honesty, and consciously decide if this is the kind of person you want to invest your time in? Each of these options reveals something completely different about your emotional maturity. Men who explode in moral outrage demonstrate a lack of emotional control. They need the world to behave according to their expectations to remain stable. Men who swallow it and pretend they saw nothing demonstrate a lack of self-respect. They are so desperate for approval that they accept any behavior to maintain the connection. But men who approach the situation with genuine curiosity, who ask directly about the discrepancy without emotional accusation, who establish clear boundaries about the kind of honesty they expect, those men demonstrate balanced strength. And that is what's being measured. I recently worked with a client who spent 2 years in a relationship thinking everything was perfect. He was successful, attentive, did everything right according to the traditional manual of how to be a good partner, but he had a specific trait. He was a completely different person, depending on the social context. With her alone, he was romantic and vulnerable. With his friends, he became the macho guy who made jokes about relationships. With her family, he was the overly polite, perfect son-in-law. His partner noticed these shifts and correctly interpreted them. He didn't have an integrated self, just a collection of personas he strategically switched between. She broke up with him out of the blue one day, saying that something didn't feel authentic. He was devastated, not understanding what he had done wrong. He had done everything right on the surface, but he had failed the fundamental test, being consistently himself in all contexts. The relational math here is brutal but simple. Modern women have unprecedented access to information about you through multiple channels, your social media, your interactions with others, even what you do when you think no one is watching. She can see how you treat waiters, how you talk about ex-partners, how you act when you're stressed at work. Each of these data points contributes to a psychological map of who you really are. And if there is a significant discrepancy between the version you present to her and the version that emerges in these other contexts, she will notice. She may not confront you immediately. She may not even verbalize the observation, but she will catalog this information and use it to inform future decisions about how much to invest in the relationship. Consider another common scenario. You are at a social event. Someone makes a subtly disrespectful comment about her or your relationship. Maybe it's a joke about how you lost your freedom, or a comment about how she controls you, or any variation of this common cultural theme. How do you respond? Do you laugh along so you don't seem like the sensitive guy who can't take a joke? Do you sit in uncomfortable silence waiting for the moment to pass? Or do you calmly but firmly establish a boundary, making it clear that certain types of comments are not acceptable without becoming defensive or aggressive? Most men fail here because they have been culturally programmed to value approval from the male group over loyalty to their partner. They laugh at the joke because confronting it would be making a scene. But here's what she sees. You don't have the courage to defend the partnership when there is a social cost to doing so. You choose temporary comfort with strangers over respect for the person who is supposedly your priority, and she registers that. She might not say anything in the moment, but that observation goes into the mental file of times he showed that other men are more important than me when he has to choose. The pattern I consistently observe is this. Men who are genuinely trustworthy don't need to perform trustworthiness. They are simply the same person in all contexts because there is genuine integration between their stated values and their observable behaviors. They don't have a public version and a private version. They just have one version that expresses itself slightly differently, depending on the context, but maintains the same fundamental principles. When you are this type of man, you pass the consistency test without even knowing you're being tested. Because you're not trying to pass, you're just being. But here is where this gets complicated. The temptation, when you start to notice these tests, is to become hyper-aware and start performing consistency. You start to calibrate every interaction, to think, how will she interpret this? To modify your behavior, to align with what you think she wants to see. And paradoxically, this is exactly what makes you fail the test. Because now you are performing instead of being. And performance, no matter how sophisticated, eventually reveals its cracks under sustained pressure. The only genuine way to pass this test is to do the inner work of becoming an integrated person. This means identifying your real values, not the ones you think you should have. It means eliminating the discrepancies between who you say you are and how you actually behave. It means being willing to lose the approval of some people to maintain integrity with your principles. It's hard work. It's work that most men never do because it's easier to simply have different versions for different audiences. But it is also the work that separates men who are consistently chosen from men who are temporarily tolerated. So when she creates situations where you have to choose between consistency and comfort, she's not being manipulative. She's collecting essential data on whether you are a viable long-term partner or just someone who is temporarily performing the role until something better comes along. And the brutal truth is that most men are performing without even realizing it. They think being a good boyfriend is about doing the right things, buying flowers, remembering dates, saying the right words. But being a genuinely valuable partner is about being fundamentally reliable across multiple contexts and situations. It's about her knowing that the man she sees alone is the same man that exists when she's not looking. The second test operates on an even more fundamental level. She is measuring whether your attention is a scarce or abundant resource. In the past, your physical presence was enough to signal investment. You were there, not somewhere else, and that was sufficient. Today, you can be physically present while mentally absent, divided between her, your phone, thoughts about work, and constant comparisons with other options. And she knows this. She grew up in the same culture of fragmented attention that you did. She understands intimately what it's like to be with someone whose body is in the same space, but whose mind is in dozens of other places simultaneously. So she tests. You are watching something together, a movie, a series, any shared content. She makes a comment about what's happening on screen. It's not a deep or particularly interesting comment. It's just a casual observation, the kind of thing people say when they're sharing an experience. You give a generic response without taking your eyes off the screen, an uh-huh, or yeah, or any automatic variation that requires zero cognitive processing. It seems completely irrelevant, right? Just a trivial moment among thousands of similar moments. But she has just collected crucial information about how present you are when there is no sexual stimulus or novelty involved. She has observed that you are in passive consumption mode, that your attention is on the content and not the shared experience, that you are not really with her. You are just occupying the same physical space while consuming entertainment in parallel. And she registers that. The repetition of these micro moments over weeks and months builds a narrative about whether you are someone who only appreciates the high-intensity moments or if you truly inhabit the relationship in all its states. I recently worked with a woman who was considering ending a 3-year relationship. Her partner was objectively a good man, hardworking, faithful, with no obvious vices or destructive behaviors, but she described a persistent feeling of loneliness even when they were together. We explored this more deeply. The pattern was consistent. He was present for the important moments, special dates, serious conversations, moments of sexual intimacy. But in the intervals between these peaks, he was mentally absent, on the couch, together but scrolling through his phone, having dinner together but clearly thinking about work, technically present, functionally absent. She couldn't articulate exactly what was wrong because on the surface, everything seemed correct. He wasn't doing anything obviously problematic, but she felt on a visceral level that she was not a real priority. She was just the person occupying the partner space in his life, while his true attention was fragmented among dozens of other things. And here's what is devastating about this. He genuinely thought he was being a good partner. He was fulfilling all the visible obligations, but he was completely failing the invisible test of sustained presence. The mathematics of attention have fundamentally changed. Previous generations had limited attention resources: television, radio, a few magazines, face-to-face conversations. Your attention was naturally more concentrated because there simply weren't as many alternatives competing for it. Today, you have literally infinite stimulus options available in your pocket. You can be with her while simultaneously checking messages, scrolling feeds, thinking about that comment someone made online, planning your next project. Your attention has become an infinitely divisible resource, and the natural tendency is to treat it as such. But deep relationships don't work with fragmented attention. They require sustained periods of undivided focus, where you are genuinely present with the other person. And she is testing whether you still have the capacity for this, or if you have become so addicted to constant stimulation that genuine presence has become impossible for you. When she makes that casual comment during the movie, and you respond on autopilot, she isn't measuring if you found the comment interesting. She's measuring if you are there with her or if you are just occupying space while consuming content in parallel. Consider another common scenario. You are talking about something important to her, a problem at work, a situation with friends, anything with real emotional weight. In the middle of the conversation, you glance at your phone. It's not a long look, just a few seconds to check a notification. You immediately return to the conversation. From your point of view, it was trivial. You were 95% present, just a brief distraction. From her point of view, you have just demonstrated that there is something on your phone more important than the vulnerable moment she is sharing with you. Her interpretation is not unfair or exaggerated. It's economically rational. She is investing emotional energy in sharing something significant. You are signaling that your attention is an abundant resource that can be freely divided, even during moments of vulnerability. The logical conclusion: you don't value access to her inner life enough to give your full attention even when she is literally handing it to you. And if you don't value it when she's giving it freely, how much will you value it when it requires real effort to access? The pattern I observe is that modern men treat attention as an infinite resource because technologically it is infinite. You can always add one more. Thing to your fragmented consciousness. But emotionally, genuine attention remains a scarce resource. You only have a limited amount of deep presence available in any given period, and viable relationships consume a significant portion of this limited resource. When you treat attention as abundant and divisible, you are fundamentally communicating that she does not deserve access to the scarce and valuable resource. She only deserves access to the abundant and cheap one. Here is where men get confused. They think presence is about quantity of time. But I spend every evening with her. Yes, you do. But how much of that time are you genuinely present versus just sharing physical space while your mind is elsewhere? She would prefer 30 minutes of complete, undivided attention over 3 hours of physical presence with fragmented attention. Because 30 real minutes demonstrate that you value the connection enough to give the scarce resource. 3 divided hours demonstrate that you are willing to give the cheap resource while saving the valuable one for other things. So, when she tests your presence through these micro moments, the comment during the movie, the story about her day, the shared vulnerability, she is measuring something fundamental about your capacity for real intimacy. Men who can only be present during high-intensity moments, sex, conflict, important events, but are mentally absent during the normal valleys of shared life, reveal something critical. They are addicted to novelty and intensity, unable to find value in the mundane moments that make up 90% of any long-term relationship. And here's the truth that will bother you. You are probably failing this test regularly without realizing it. You have probably given that automatic dozens of times. You have probably glanced at your phone during her vulnerability. You have probably been physically present, but mentally absent more times than you can count. And each of these instances has been registered and contributed to a narrative about how much you truly value access to her inner life. The only way to pass this test is to recognize that genuine attention is a scarce resource and treat it as such. This means creating periods of undivided presence where the phone is literally in another room, where you are not mentally planning the next thing, where you are genuinely there with her. It doesn't have to be all the time, that would be unsustainable and unnecessary, but it needs to be regular. Enough to demonstrate that you value the connection enough to give the truly valuable resource, not just the abundant and cheap one. The third test is about identity under social pressure. She will put you in situations where you have to choose between impressing her group or maintaining your own essence. It's not about being liked by everyone. That's impossible and even undesirable. It's about something much more fundamental. Do you remain yourself when there is a social cost to doing so? Or do you modify your personality to fit every new context you encounter? I observe a consistent pattern. Strategic. Women introduce partners into progressively more challenging social circles. First, the closest friends, the group where she has the most influence and can partially control the narrative. Then family, where there are established power dynamics and you are clearly the outsider being evaluated. Then professional or social environments where you have no natural allies, where everyone has known her for years and you are the new element being integrated into the ecosystem. Each of these environments applies different pressure for you to adapt, to modify yourself, to become the version of you that this specific group will approve of. What's being measured is not whether you impress everyone, impossible and irrelevant. What's being measured is whether you maintain your internal center of gravity when subjected to increasing social pressures. Do you fundamentally change who you are to gain approval? Do you become overly performative to compensate for insecurity about not belonging? Or do you simply exist in these spaces with the same energy you have anywhere else, comfortable in your own skin, even when you are clearly the foreigner? Let me show you how this operates in practice. You are having dinner with her group of friends, 5 women who have known each other for years, who have inside jokes, shared references, stories you haven't lived. The conversation naturally flows between topics where you have no context. How do you respond? Option 1. You sit in uncomfortable silence, clearly wishing you were somewhere else, making minimal effort to integrate. Option 2. You become overly animated, trying to force your way into every conversation, making jokes that don't land because you don't understand the context, obviously performing sociability. Option 3. You simply exist in the space, ask genuine questions when curious, Contribute when you have something relevant, stay comfortably silent when you don't. And don't treat the moment as an approval test you need to pass. Most men choose option 1 or 2. Option 1 reveals insecurity disguised as indifference. You don't know how to exist in spaces where you are not automatically the center or where you have no established status. Option 2 reveals insecurity disguised as extroversion. You are so desperate for approval that you become a performative caricature of sociability. Option 3 demonstrates something completely different. You don't need external validation to feel valuable. You can exist comfortably in spaces where you are not the protagonist, where you are just another person, present, without treating it as a threat to your identity. I recently worked with a man who was confused about why his partner was distancing herself. They had obvious compatibility, similar interests, aligned values, good chemistry, but she started mentioning that something wasn't right after introducing him to her social circle. We explored the details. What emerged was a devastating pattern. He was a completely different person depending on who was in the environment. With his friends, he was the funny, relaxed guy. With co-workers, he was the serious, focused professional. With her group, he tried to be some confusing mix of the two, modifying his behavior every few minutes depending on who was talking, like a social chameleon unable to hold a consistent form. She interpreted this correctly. He didn't have an integrated self. He had a collection of personas that he strategically switched between depending on what he thought each audience wanted to see. And here's why that's a fatal problem. If you are a different person in every context, who are you really? Which version should she trust? If you fundamentally modify your personality to gain the approval of each new group, what stops you from modifying your personality in the relationship with her when an incentive to do so arises? The trap here is that men interpret this test as, I need to impress the people important to her. So they go into these social encounters in performance mode, trying to be the version they think will be approved of. But the real test is the exact opposite. Can he maintain his essence even when there is social pressure to modify it? The more you try to impress, the more you demonstrate that your identity is negotiable depending on external incentives. And if your identity is negotiable, in social settings, why should she believe it is fixed in a relationship with her? Consider an even more revealing scenario. You are at a social event with her, and someone makes a comment that directly contradicts something you believe or value. Maybe it's a political opinion, a perspective on relationships, any topic where you have a clear position. But the person making the comment has social status in that environment. It's a longtime friend of hers, or a respected family member, or an important colleague. How do you respond? Do you stay silent, avoiding conflict even if it means betraying your own values? Do you superficially agree, pretending it doesn't matter that much to you? Or do you express your differing perspective respectfully but clearly, even knowing it might create temporary tension? Most men choose silence or superficial agreement. They rationalize, it's not worth creating conflict over this, or it's just dinner, I don't need to debate every little thing. But here's what she sees. You don't have the courage to uphold your convictions when there's a social cost to doing so. Your beliefs are performative. You express them when it's safe and convenient, but you abandon them when there's pressure to conform. And if you abandon your convictions to impress people you just met, what will you abandon when the relationship with her becomes inconvenient? I observe a consistent pattern. Men who are genuinely sure of themselves do not fundamentally change who they are to fit into different contexts. They might adjust their form of expression. You naturally speak differently to your partner's grandmothers versus your childhood friends. But the fundamental content remains the same. Your values don't change, your core personality doesn't change. Your sense of who you are does not depend on the approval of the specific group you are currently with. But here is the brutal reality. Most modern men have a fragmented identity. They are different people in different contexts because they have never done the internal integration work necessary to have a coherent self. They have a version for friends, a version for work, a version for family, a version for a romantic partner. And all these versions are fundamentally incompatible with each other, revealing that at the core there is no true you. There is only a collection of masks you switch between depending on what you think each situation requires. So, when she puts you in progressively challenging social situations, She's not trying to make you uncomfortable out of cruelty. She's applying pressure to see if you hold your shape, or if you collapse into whatever form the environment demands. Men who hold their shape demonstrate something crucial. They know who they are. They value their own essence enough to maintain it even when it's inconvenient, and they don't need constant external validation to feel valuable. Men who constantly modify themselves to fit in demonstrate the opposite. They don't know who they are without an external reference. Their identity is completely dependent on the approval of the group present, and they cannot be trusted because there is no true them to trust. And here is the final truth about this test. The more consciously you try to pass it, the more you fail. Because the attempt at conscious performance is exactly what reveals a lack of genuine integration. Men who naturally pass don't know they are being tested because they are simply consistently themselves in all contexts. They don't have an elaborate social strategy. They just exist, comfortable in their own identity, indifferent to the approval or disapproval of any specific group. The fourth test operates in the most obvious yet misunderstood territory for most men: how you interact with other women in her presence. She's not going to hire someone to seduce you. That only happens in bad movies and already destroyed relationships. But she will meticulously observe every interaction you have with other women, especially those who are attractive or show interest in you, and she will interpret every micro-behavior as evidence of your real trustworthiness versus your performed trustworthiness. Here's what most men don't understand. She's not measuring if you're tempted. Of course you're tempted. You're a heterosexual man with a normally functioning visual system. What she's measuring is whether you need external surveillance to behave appropriately, or if you have an internal compass that operates regardless of who is watching. The difference is fundamental. The first man requires constant management. He behaves only when there's an external reason to do so. The second man simply lives by his values, even when no one is checking. Consider a classic scenario. You are at some establishment, a restaurant, a bar, any event. The waitress or bartender or person serving is somehow attractive, and she shows interest in you, not obviously or inappropriately, just the kind of subtle flirtation that attractive people use to maximize tips or for casual fun. How do you respond? Do you maintain professional eye contact and a purely transactional interaction? Do you subtly start to show off, raising your voice volume, making extra jokes, demonstrating status? Do you become uncomfortable and compensate by treating the person coldly or rudely? Each of these responses reveals something different. A professional and distant interaction demonstrates that you have clear boundaries that don't depend on external observation. Subtle showing off demonstrates that you are constantly in value signaling mode for attractive women, even when your partner is literally by your side. Discomfort and coldness demonstrate that you know you are tempted and need to actively suppress that temptation through obvious compensatory behavior. The answer she's looking for is none of these three. It's something even more subtle. You interact the same way you interact with anyone providing a service, with no modification in behavior based on her attractiveness, with no demonstration of interest, but also no obvious effort to avoid interest. You simply don't play the game, not because you are actively resisting temptation, but because you are genuinely unavailable in a way that you don't even process the interaction as a potential opportunity. I recently worked with a couple where this pattern had created growing conflict. The man was objectively faithful. He had never cheated, never shown real interest in other women. But he had a specific behavior. When an attractive woman was present, he became a slightly amplified version of himself. Not obvious, not dramatic, just 10–15% more performative, a slightly more projected voice, a slightly more expansive posture, slightly more focused attention. His partner noticed this and interpreted it correctly. He was constantly in value demonstration mode for attractive women, signaling availability even without a conscious intention to do. So he became defensive when confronted. But I never did anything. I didn't even talk to those women inappropriately. He was technically correct, but he was fundamentally missing the point. The problem was not that he was actively flirting. The problem was that his attention and energy were automatically captured by female attractiveness in a way he didn't even consciously perceive. He was operating on pure evolutionary programming. See attractive woman, demonstrate value, see if there is reciprocal interest. Even when he consciously didn't want to do it, His automatic behavior revealed the pattern. His partner interpreted this with economic rationality. If he can't even control automatic modifications in his behavior in front of her, what happens when she's not watching? If a random waitress is enough to activate value demonstration mode, what happens when an attractive coworker expresses real interest? She wasn't being irrationally insecure. She was logically extrapolating from observable evidence to conclusions about reliability when external surveillance is not present. Here's where men get completely confused. They think the test is about not cheating, not openly flirting, not doing anything obvious and inappropriate. So they perform fidelity in an exaggerated way. They actively avoid any contact with attractive women, make a point of constantly mentioning their partner, demonstrate an obvious disinterest that is clearly performative. But this is equally revealing, because it demonstrates that the temptation is real and requires active management, not that you are genuinely unavailable automatically. Consider another scenario. You have a co-worker, an attractive, single, interesting woman. She sends you a message late at night about an urgent project that needs your input. The message is technically appropriate, really about work, no explicit flirting, but the timing is suspicious, and there is a clear subtext that she is creating an opportunity for interaction outside the normal professional context. How do you respond? Option 1, you respond immediately and enthusiastically, happy for the attention from an attractive woman, even if it's just work. Option 2, you ignore it completely, leaving the message unanswered to avoid any appearance of inappropriate interaction. Option 3, you respond professionally and concisely, address the work issue, and establish a clear expectation that off-hours communication should be genuinely urgent. Option 4, you show the message to your partner transparently, discuss how to respond, and demonstrate complete openness about the situation. The first option is an obvious failure. You are clearly receptive to female attention regardless of the appropriate context. The second option seems safe, but is equally problematic. You are avoiding it because you know you are tempted, not because you are genuinely unavailable. The fourth option seems ideal, but is performative. You are conspicuously demonstrating fidelity, which reveals a need for external validation. The third option is the only genuine response. You handle it professionally because it's a professional matter. You establish boundaries because they are appropriate boundaries, and you don't need to make a show of it because it's simply how you operate, regardless of who is watching. The pattern I consistently observe. Men who are genuinely unavailable don't need to perform unavailability. They don't actively avoid attractive women because there's nothing to avoid. They simply don't process these interactions as potentially romantic or sexual. Their alert system for reproductive opportunities is fundamentally offline when it comes to other women. Not because they are heroically resisting temptation, but because they are genuinely not on the market in a way that they don't even register these opportunities as real opportunities. But here is the brutal reality. Most men do not have this genuine unavailability. They have contingent fidelity. They don't cheat because the social or relational consequences would be bad, not because they are fundamentally unavailable. And the difference is detectable through dozens of micro-behaviors that reveal where their attention truly lies. The glance that lingers half a second too long, the posture that expands slightly, the tone of voice that becomes marginally more engaging. Each of these signs is unconscious and automatic, and each one communicates, "I'm still available in theory, just not in practice due to an external commitment." So when she tests how you interact with other women, she is not being insecure or controlling. She is collecting evidence about whether you are genuinely committed or contingently faithful. Genuinely committed means you are fundamentally not on the market. You don't even process other women as possibilities because you have already made a choice that eliminated other options from the possibility space. Contingently faithful means you avoid other options for strategic reasons while keeping them in the possibility space in case circumstances change. And here is the final part that will bother you. You are probably contingently faithful and don't even realize it. You probably think you are genuinely committed because you technically don't cheat, don't openly flirt, don't do anything obviously inappropriate. But your micro-behaviors reveal a different story. Your attention is still automatically captured by female attractiveness. You still process other women as potentially interesting, even if you consciously don't intend to act on that interest. You are still fundamentally available, just choosing not to exercise that availability for strategic reasons. The only way to genuinely pass this test is to do the inner work of becoming fundamentally unavailable, not performatively unavailable, where you actively avoid temptation while remaining tempted. Genuinely unavailable, where other women simply no longer register as opportunities because you have already made a choice that closed that possibility space. It is a fundamental shift in how you process female attractiveness, and it cannot be performed, only developed through a real commitment that goes beyond calculating consequences. The fifth test operates in particularly treacherous territory. She is mapping where she truly stands in your hierarchy of values when difficult choices arise. It's not about simple jealousy or demanding that you abandon everything for her. It's about something much more nuanced, understanding if she is a genuine priority or if she is just the person who fills the partner space in your life while your true priorities lie elsewhere. Here's the central trap. Previous generations had relatively clear and socially agreed upon hierarchies. First came economic survival, work, providing, then came family, then came personal interests. Women not only accepted this hierarchy, they actively preferred it because it signaled stability and the ability to provide. But the economy and social structure have changed fundamentally. Most women now have their own economic capacity. They don't need a provider in the traditional sense. So, what do they want? They want to know they are a conscious choice, a real priority, not just a convenient occupant of the partner space. Let me show you how this test works in practice. You have an important work event that could advance your career, crucial networking, a promotion opportunity, a moment that could change your professional trajectory. She schedules something at the same time, not something trivial like watching TV, but also not something obviously more important than your professional event. Maybe it's dinner with friends she sees regularly, or a class for something she could do on another day, or a family event that happens every year. There is theoretical flexibility in her event, but she schedules it at a time that conflicts with your professional commitment. How do you respond? Option 1. You cancel your work event immediately without hesitation, demonstrating that she always comes first. Option 2. You go to the work event without even seriously considering hers, demonstrating that career is the unquestionable priority. Option 3. You become visibly conflicted, apologize excessively, and try to negotiate an impossible solution that satisfies both. Option 4. You acknowledge the conflict directly, genuinely explain why the professional event is important at this specific moment, without being overly apologetic, offer a real alternative that demonstrates you value time with her and uphold your professional commitment. The first option seems ideal, but is a fatal flaw. You have demonstrated that you have no mission of your own beyond satisfying her, that you abandon important opportunities at the first hint of conflict, that you have no sense of purpose independent of the relationship. The second option is equally problematic. You have demonstrated that she is peripheral to your true priorities, that work always comes first without consideration, that the relationship is a convenient commodity you maintain only when it doesn't interfere with what really matters. The third option reveals a different weakness. You can't make a decision and stick to it. You treat inevitable conflicts as catastrophes to be avoided at all costs. You apologize for having your own priorities. The fourth option is the only one that demonstrates real maturity. You have clear priorities. You can articulate why they are priorities without apologizing. You show she is important through real alternative action, instead of just words, and you maintain integrity with your own commitments. I recently worked with a man who was confused about why his partner was distancing herself. He worked 70-80 hours a week at a startup, genuinely building something important. On the weekends, when he finally had free time, he just wanted to decompress, watch sports, play video games, do activities that required zero mental energy. His partner rarely complained directly, but over 18 months, she progressively distanced herself emotionally until she finally broke up, saying she felt she was never really a priority. He became defensive. But I worked so hard precisely for us, to build financial security, to have a better future. He was technically correct. His intentions were good. But he was completely missing the point. She wasn't questioning his intentions, she was observing his actual choices, and the pattern was clear. He had unlimited energy for work, limited energy to decompress, and zero energy to invest in the relationship. Work received 80% of his life, recovery received 15%. She received the remaining 5%, and only when nothing else was competing for his attention. The real hierarchy was work first, rest second, her a distant third. And here's what's devastating. He genuinely thought he was prioritizing the relationship because he thought about her while working, because the work was for them, because technically they were living together. But thinking is not a priority. Intention is not a priority. Real investment of time and energy is a priority. And when she added up where he actually allocated his finite resources, she was clearly a third option. Tolerated when convenient, ignored when inconvenient. The hierarchy test isn't about a single schedule conflict. It's about a sustained pattern of choices when your stated priorities conflict with your personal conveniences. Every man says his partner is a priority, but observe where he allocates time when he's tired, where he allocates energy when he's stressed, what he cancels first when a schedule conflict arises. These real choices reveal the true hierarchy, not the declared one. Consider another revealing scenario. You're in the middle of something. You enjoy watching an important game, playing online with friends, any leisure activity you value. She comes in clearly stressed, needing to talk about something that's bothering her. It's not a medical emergency. It's not an existential crisis. It's the normal stress of the day that needs to be verbally processed. How do you respond? Option 1. You pause immediately, give her your full attention, and abandon your activity without hesitation. Option 2. You say, just 5 more minutes, but it becomes 20 minutes, then 30 until she gives up trying. Option 3. You multitask, keeping one eye on the screen while giving her partial attention. Option 4. You finish what you're doing at a reasonable, natural stopping point, end of the game, end of the mission, not a perpetual, just one more. Then give her genuine attention without resentment for having paused your activity. The first option seems ideal, but communicates something problematic. You don't value your own leisure time enough to set boundaries. You treat her every need as automatically more important than anything of yours. You have no sense of entitlement to your own life. The second option is an obvious insult. You are demonstrating that passive entertainment is more important than her emotional need. The third option is worse. You are faking presence while clearly being elsewhere mentally. The fourth option is the only one that properly balances. You demonstrate that your life is not interruptible at any moment for any reason. You complete your current commitment in a reasonable time instead of abandoning it midway, showing integrity with your own commitments, and then you give genuine attention without making her feel like she's pulling you away from something you'd rather be doing. I observe a consistent pattern. Women don't want to always be the first priority. That would be unsustainable and even undesirable. They want to be a conscious and consistent priority, not an afterthought that receives attention only when nothing else is competing. The difference is fundamental. The first means you cancel everything whenever she shows up. The second means you genuinely integrate her into your life so that she receives a real portion of your finite resources, not just the leftovers after everything else has been allocated. So when she creates schedule conflicts, purposefully or not, she is testing something critical: which version of priority she represents to you. If you always choose her first, you are demonstrating a lack of your own mission. If you always choose other things first, you are demonstrating that she is peripheral. But if you navigate consciously, choosing her sometimes and other priorities at other times in a way that creates a pattern of genuine investment without dependence or neglect, you are demonstrating something rare: the ability to integrate a meaningful relationship into a life with its own purpose. And here is the final truth about this test. Most modern men fail in one of two ways. First, they have no mission or purpose of their own beyond the relationship, so they always give, in becoming emotional satellites orbiting her life. Second, they have ambitions and interests, but treat the relationship as a convenient accessory that shouldn't interfere with what really matters, turning their partner into a disposable commodity that exists only to fill needs when opportune. The rare man who navigates this correctly is one who has a life with its own purpose, a mission, ambitions, interests that exist independently of any relationship, but who consciously integrates his partner as a genuine priority within that life. He doesn't abandon his mission for her, but he also doesn't treat her as peripheral to his mission. He creates a life where both exist as real priorities, where conflicts are navigated consciously, instead of being resolved by an automatic rule that always favors one over the other. The sixth and most devastating test operates on a time horizon that most men don't even realize they're being evaluated on. She is measuring if you are the type of man who needs constant validation, regular sexual stimulation, and perpetual novelty, or if you can maintain emotional investment during the inevitable valleys of any long-term relationship. Here is a reality no one told you when you started navigating relationships. Passion is not linear. Connection is not constant. Every relationship goes through cycles of varying intensity. Honeymoon periods where everything is new and exciting. Stabilization periods where you develop routines and patterns. Periods of low intensity where life just happens and the relationship becomes the backdrop instead of the main focus. These cycles are completely normal and inevitable, but most men interpret any decrease in intensity as a sign of trouble, and they respond in ways that create the very problems they feared. Let me show you how this works. You go through the first intense months, frequent sex, deep conversations, late into the night, constant excitement about discovering each other. Then, naturally and inevitably, this begins to normalize. The frequency of her compliments decreases because she no longer needs to constantly reaffirm interest. It's already established. The sex continues but becomes less experimental because you've discovered what works and naturally gravitate toward it. The conversations become more practical, logistical planning, discussions about the day, less deep philosophy about the meaning of life. How do you respond to this completely normal transition of intensity? Option 1. You interpret it as her disinterest and become insecure, starting to seek constant reassurance. Do you still find me attractive? Is everything okay between us? Do you still love me? Option 2. You interpret it as a loss of passion and start creating artificial drama to regenerate intensity, provoking jealousy, creating unnecessary conflicts, seeking emotion through turmoil. Option 3. You interpret it as a sign the relationship is over and pull away emotionally, maintaining distance to protect yourself from vulnerability. Option 4. You simply continue being the same man, understanding that romantic intensity naturally fluctuates and that true intimacy is built in the valleys as much as on the peaks. The first option reveals a devastating insecurity. You need constant external validation to maintain a sense of self-worth. When she naturally stops giving constant positive feedback because it's no longer necessary, interest is already established, you interpret the absence of reassurance as the presence of disinterest. So you start explicitly asking for validation, becoming an emotional drain that requires constant management. The second option is equally problematic. You are addicted to emotional intensity, unable to appreciate stability, needing perpetual drama to feel that the relationship is real. The third option reveals a critical inability to tolerate vulnerability. When the intensity wanes, you interpret it as imminent rejection and protect yourself by pulling away first. You basically end the relationship to avoid the potential pain of being left. The fourth option is the only one that demonstrates real emotional maturity. You understand that passion is not constant, that routine is not the death of a relationship, that stability is a feature of a deep connection rather than a bug to be avoided. I recently worked with a woman who was considering ending a 2-year relationship. Her partner was an objectively good man in most dimensions, hard-working, honest, no obvious destructive behaviors, but she described a specific pattern. He needed constant romantic validation to feel secure. Every time she was busy with work or friends, every time she simply wanted time alone, every time she wasn't in an active romantic mode, he interpreted it as rejection and started seeking reassurance. The conversations followed the same pattern. Is everything okay? Are you mad at me? You seem distant. Do you still want to be with me? He genuinely believed he was communicating well, checking the pulse of the relationship, being emotionally open. But what she experienced was completely different. She had to constantly manage his insecurity, reassure him that normal fluctuations in her mood and energy didn't mean rejection, and perform romantic enthusiasm even when she just wanted to exist in peace. Here's what's devastating. He had turned the relationship into perpetual emotional labor for her. She couldn't just be, she had to constantly demonstrate and reassure, not because she had changed her mind about him, but because he was incapable of maintaining emotional stability without a constant external feed of validation. And eventually, it became unsustainable. She wasn't ending it because she loved him less. She was ending it because she could no longer carry the emotional weight of constantly reassuring him that she loved him. The pattern I consistently observe is this. Relationships go through natural and inevitable cycles. The beginning is intense because everything is new, and you are rapidly collecting information about compatibility. After a few months, you've established basic patterns, and the intensity naturally decreases because you no longer need to be in constant discovery mode. This doesn't mean the connection has diminished. It means it has matured from exciting novelty to comfortable familiarity. But modern men have been culturally programmed to believe that passion must be constant, that a decrease in intensity means trouble, that a healthy relationship is one where you are perpetually excited and validated. So when the inevitable normalization happens, they interpret it as a failure rather than a natural progression. And their responses to this misinterpretation create the real problems. Consider a specific pattern that emerges in the first 6 to 12 months of most relationships. In the beginning, sex is frequent and experimental. You're exploring, discovering, enjoying the novelty. After a few months, the frequency naturally decreases a bit, and you gravitate toward what works best instead of constantly experimenting. This is a completely normal progression. You've established preferences and are consistently enjoying them, instead of treating every encounter as an experiment. But observe how the typical man interprets this. He compares the current frequency and intensity to the honeymoon period and concludes that the passion is dying. So he responds in one of several destructive ways. Maybe he starts pushing for more frequent sex, creating a dynamic where she feels she has to perform desire she doesn't naturally feel at the moment. Maybe he becomes insecure about his attractiveness, starting to seek constant sexual validation. Maybe he just passively accepts it and silently resents it, allowing emotional distance to grow. None of these responses acknowledge a basic reality. Sexual desire naturally fluctuates with hormonal cycles, stress levels, and relationship stages. The frequency in month 3 will not be the frequency in month 20. This is not a problem. It's a normal feature of any lasting bond. A mature man understands this and doesn't interpret normal fluctuations as an existential crisis. An immature man treats any change as a catastrophe that must be immediately reversed. I observe a similar pattern with emotional communication. At the beginning of a relationship, you have deep conversations constantly, sharing personal stories, exploring values and beliefs, discovering each other on a philosophical level. After a few months, you've shared most of the big stories. You've explored most of the deep topics. Conversations naturally become more practical. The logistics of the day, planning for the future, discussions about joint decisions. An immature man interprets this as, we have nothing left to talk about. He misses the intensity of the initial conversations and concludes that the intellectual connection is dying. But a mature man understands that deep intimacy does not require constant novelty. You can have deep intimacy discussing the week's schedule because there is a shared context, a common history, an understanding that you are a team working together on a shared life. The depth doesn't just come from philosophical topics, it comes from the quality of the partnership that informs even practical conversations. Here is the real test. When the relationship enters a period of low intensity, less frequent sex, more practical conversations, fewer spontaneous compliments, less romantic drama, can you maintain emotional investment? Can you value stability and comfort instead of always seeking a peak of intensity? Can you be present during the normal routine without interpreting the absence of excitement as the presence of a problem? Most men fail this test spectacularly. They are addicted to novelty and intensity, unable to appreciate stability as a value in itself. So they interpret any period of low intensity as a sign that the relationship is ending, and their anxious responses create a self-fulfilling prophecy. They become needy when she needs space. They create drama when she wants peace. They seek validation when she simply wants to exist together without having to perform active passion. And eventually, she gets tired. Not because the love has diminished, but because she can no longer carry the weight of constantly reassuring him that normal fluctuations don't mean rejection. She can no longer perform perpetual romantic enthusiasm to keep his ego inflated. She can no longer manage his insecurity over every natural change in the rhythm of the relationship. I worked with another case recently that illustrates this pattern perfectly. The couple had been together for 18 months. The woman was happy and invested. The man was constantly anxious, interpreting every small change as evidence of an impending problem. She spent a weekend with her friends. He became insecure about whether she still wanted to be with him. She was tired and didn't want to go out. He interpreted it as a loss of interest in doing things together. She preferred to sleep early instead of having sex. He became anxious about his attractiveness. Each of these individual moments is completely normal and explainable by factors that have nothing to do with the quality of the relationship, but accumulated over months. The constant need to reassure him became an unsustainable emotional labor. She eventually broke up with him, and he was completely confused. But I always cared so much. I was always checking if everything was okay. I constantly communicated my feelings. He was technically correct that he did all these things, but he was missing the fundamental point. His communication wasn't about building connection. It was about managing his own anxiety through constant external validation. Is everything okay was not a genuine question about the state of the relationship. It was a plea for reassurance that he was still wanted, and the difference matters enormously. Emotionally stable men do not need constant reassurance because their sense of worth does not depend entirely on external validation. They understand that their partner has her own life, her own moods, her own cycles, that have nothing to do with how much she values the relationship. They can tolerate periods of low intensity without interpreting it as rejection. They can give her space when she needs it without becoming anxious that space means permanent distance. But here is the brutal reality. Most modern men have an emotional stability that is dependent on constant external validation. They need regular positive feedback to maintain a sense of being valuable and desired. When that feedback naturally diminishes as the relationship matures, they interpret the absence of constant validation as the presence of rejection, and their anxious responses create the exact outcome they feared. She eventually pulls away because the emotional weight of constantly managing his insecurity becomes greater than the value of remaining in the relationship. So what is the truth that no one wants to admit about these 6 tests? The truth is this: you are being constantly evaluated on dimensions you probably don't even realize exist. Behavioral consistency across multiple contexts, the ability to give genuine attention versus performative presence, the maintenance of your own identity under social pressure, genuine unavailability versus contingent fidelity, the real hierarchy of priorities versus statements about what matters, emotional stability independent of constant external validation. Every example I've shown, every pattern I've identified, leads to the same inescapable conclusion. Modern relationships are simultaneously more transparent on the surface and infinitely more complex in their deeper layers. While previous generations navigated explicit expectations and well-defined roles, he provides economically, she manages the domestic sphere. You are navigating a labyrinth of implicit expectations that assess dimensions of compatibility your grandparents didn't even consider relevant. She's not doing this to be cruel or manipulative. She's doing it because the cost of choosing wrong has never been higher, and the options have never been more abundant. She can leave a bad relationship more easily than any previous generation. She has less social pressure to tolerate an inadequate partner. She has more access to alternatives through technology and expanded social connections. So it makes complete economic sense that she would develop sophisticated methods to assess if you are really who you say you are, if you can maintain value over time, if you have the capacity to be a genuine partner versus a temporary performer. The brutal irony is that the more you consciously try to pass these tests, the more you fail. because the attempt to perform demonstrates the exact lack of authenticity the tests were designed to detect. It's like trying to fall asleep. The conscious effort prevents the desired outcome. The man who naturally passes these tests doesn't know he's being tested because he is simply consistently himself in all contexts. He doesn't have an impress version and a real version. He has only one integrated version that responds authentically to each situation without strategic calculation. So what do you do with this information now that you see these patterns operating? You essentially have two choices. First, become resentful of the game, conclude that modern relationships are elaborate manipulations, withdraw emotionally, and treat partners as disposable commodities that exist only to satisfy temporary needs. Second, accept the reality that evaluation is a natural and rational part of any partner selection, and do the necessary inner work to become the kind of man who naturally meets the criteria being assessed. The first choice leads to cynicism and loneliness, a life where you have a sequence of superficial connections but never real intimacy because you are never willing to become genuinely vulnerable. The second choice leads to relationships where you are consistently chosen, not because you passed tests, but because you are fundamentally the obvious choice, not through performance, but through genuine transformation into a man who has the qualities she is looking for. And here is the final part that will truly challenge you. If you are just now discovering that you have consistently failed tests you didn't even know you were taking, this is not a tragedy, it's an opportunity. Because you finally have the information that allows you to recalibrate. You can start doing the work of becoming an integrated person instead of a collection of personas. You can develop the capacity for genuine presence instead of physical presence with fragmented attention. You can cultivate a stable identity that doesn't change based on social pressure. You can build genuine unavailability instead of contingent fidelity. You can establish a clear hierarchy of values that integrates your partner as a real priority. You can develop emotional stability that doesn't depend on constant external validation. None of these transformations are easy. They all require honest inner work that most men never do because it's more comfortable to blame others for their own patterns of failure. But they are also the transformations that separate men who are consistently chosen from men who are temporarily tolerated. They are the transformations that allow you to build a real relationship based on genuine compatibility, instead of a performance that eventually collapses under the pressure of time. This is the truth no one wants to say out loud. You can't cheat your way into a genuine relationship. You can't perform qualities you don't have. You can't pretend to be an integrated, present, reliable, and emotionally stable man long enough to lock down a relationship and then relax into the real version of you. Because the real version eventually emerges under the pressure of daily life. And when it does, all the tests you passed performatively are exposed as temporary illusions. The only viable strategy is to stop trying to pass tests and start being the kind of man who naturally meets the criteria being evaluated. It's not about convincing her that you are valuable. It's about becoming genuinely valuable and letting her arrive at the obvious conclusion. Once you see these patterns operating, you can no longer pretend they don't exist. You can only decide if you will resent the game or elevate your game to the point where you no longer need to consciously play. And that choice, like everything else in modern relationships, reveals something fundamental about who you really are. Are you a man who wants shortcuts and tricks to manipulate the outcome without doing the real work? Or are you a man willing to do the hard work of genuine transformation because you understand that it is the only path to a relationship worth having? The answer to that question determines not only your romantic success, but the fundamental quality of the life you will live and the type of person you will become.